Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about how to do spiritual work or psychic work. And this is a good video for anybody who is basically just on a spiritual development journey. You don't have to be looking to work in the field. The concepts that I'm going to talk about today will apply to you, even if you're just a student and you never want to teach or you never want to work with people or anything like that. What we're going to talk about today will be so fundamental that you'll benefit as well, because you're going to be working with teachers and you're going to be learning and interacting in this environment anyway. So even if you're not looking to teach or work in this field, you'll still find information that is valuable for you in this video. But the way that I present it is going to be as though you want to begin to practice as a psychic or medium, if you want to work with clients or teach. And this question was actually from one of you. This question is actually from Jennifer Schreiber. So hello, Jennifer. And thank you for asking this question and for your kind words. So this is what you asked. You said, I was curious, how did you begin your blog and your work? Any advice for someone wishing to go into service and begin sharing their own cultivated teachings? Is a blog a good place to start? So awesome question for Jennifer. Awesome question Jennifer. So how did I get into being a teacher? How did I get into making videos and having my own platform and all of that kind of stuff? Where did I begin? Well, I think some of you have probably been with me for a very long time, maybe even when I started, which was actually around 2009. I started to make YouTube videos around 2009, actually, and there actually weren't very many spiritual folks on YouTube. I think there are like 2 or 3 other people who were on YouTube and sharing spiritual insight and sharing spiritual experience. At that time, YouTube was not monetized at all. And it was very, very different than it is today. Sometimes I look back at that and I just think of how far YouTube has come as a platform, because it was very different then. YouTube didn't start monetizing anything until around 7 years after, for me at least. I already started to make videos. So YouTube, in other words, was not a career. It was not anything you could profit from. And when you were making videos, it was sort of like something that you just wanted to do. You just liked the medium and you just liked it. And so that was when I started. And my channel actually began in a kind of strange way. I had been traveling the world for work and I was sort of in the environment where I was very alone all the time. I was very lonely. I often didn't speak the language, and I had so much time on my hands in between jobs that I was doing, that I got really into meditation and I got really into spirituality. And I started to have very unusual spiritual experiences. And they weren't the kind of spiritual experience that I had read about in the popular spiritual conversations. So, the kind of conversations you'd see on like Oprah Winfrey or like a talk show or mainstream spiritual stuff. Mine apparently had to do with sort of more interdimensionals or the cosmos and things like that. And so I couldn't really find any information on what I was experiencing. And I felt incredibly lonely. I felt incredibly lost. I didn't know what was happening to me. And the impulse that I had to start a YouTube channel was basically that I thought that if anyone else is having these experiences, I don't want them to be alone and I don't want them to feel like I do. And so I thought, maybe if there isn't a whole lot of information on maybe ETs and the cosmos or interdimensionals or my sort of experiences, then maybe I could start that and contribute that. And if there was a lot of information on it, I probably wouldn't have started my channel, to be honest. So the reason why I started YouTubing was because I felt like there was a void in spirituality, what I call cosmic. The void I see, it's very popular now, but I see it as kind of a cosmic spirituality. And there was none of that in the sort of mid to late 2000s. That just wasn't really around a whole lot. It wasn't considered. It was considered kind of like the ugly stepchild of spirituality, or fringe, really. That's sort of how it was. And so that's how I began. It began as just, I hope that this helps somebody. I'm just going to share my experience. And with that experience, I would get sort of writings that would come into my mind, or visions and concepts and things. And I thought, if this can help people in their life like it's helped me, then that will be good. And so that's basically how I started. It was just sort of a desire to contribute. And I was successful at that time in what I was doing, so I wasn't really looking to like get into this field. Actually, I didn't really know what I was doing, So um, actually, what's really funny when I think back is that I was sort of horrified with being on camera, and I knew nothing about like recording things. And I really wanted to just record my voice and then make these videos that had pictures. like I would be recording like a story or a message of mine, something that I made, and then I would just have pictures on the screen. And that's what I really wanted. But I was so like illiterate in technology that I had no idea how to do that. And I just couldn't figure out how. I was too busy, and so I just turned on a camera and just recorded it with my face there. But originally that's not what I wanted to do. But it's what happened. So that's actually how I started. I guess it started by wanting to have a certain conversation that I didn't feel like was in the scene, and that I didn't feel like was in the genre. And that's sort of where it came from. And also a concern that this kind of cosmic spirituality was something that needed to come to the forefront. Because if I was having these experiences and having trouble with it, I'm sure other people were. And in my mind, my young, like 20-something mind, I was like, that was the biggest atrocity, was to have people out there somewhere suffering, when maybe having conversations could ease that. And so that was where that came from. So I also nearly quit several different times. As a YouTuber, I almost quit probably about 2 or 3 times. I almost stopped doing this work. And so this has been very much an evolution for me, because I did start when I was quite young, and then went through lots of life changes and changes in my experiences, and I evolved and became more educated and more wise, I guess, in my experiences myself. And so I've grown and evolved a lot from that, 20 something year old. But I did almost quit several different times, and made a conscious choice to continue. And now it is absolutely who I am. And I'm sticking to it. It's where I am in my life. But it definitely was. I was also very shy. I'm actually naturally a very shy person. I know people may not believe that, because I'm on YouTube and I'm out here, but I'm actually, my natural constitution is actually more inward, and it's actually more shy. That's kind of more my temperament in a lot of ways, probably, unless I really know someone. So this was actually a very hard thing for me to do, because I do have sort of this more Piscean pull inward. And so it's always been, for me, it's always been what has gotten me out of my shell and wanting to be in front of a camera or work with people has always been my absolute love for the work and my love of people. And that's always what's driven me, is my love of this field, my love of this work, and my love of people. And that's what gets me out of my shell, because it's definitely not a natural, it's definitely not a natural position for me. So now let's get into the next part of your question. That's sort of, that's how I got into it. And now let's get into the next part of the question, which is any advice for someone wishing to go into service and begin sharing their own cultivated teachings? Is a blog a good place to start? I have tons of advice for this. And if you're really interested in this, I will say that I have a psychic and spiritual development community that I started years ago. It's a private platform that I've created, and there are amazing mystics there where this is discussed. I have great practicing psychics that are professionals. I have students. I have, seekers, everything on there. And there's always forums and conversations going on where people are discussing their development and their experiences, and that is really helpful to have a group or a circle, whether it be mine or another one that you find. And I also do live Q&As where a lot of it is on development like this. I do them every 2 weeks if you're interested, where I go extremely deep into these kinds of topics. So you can check that out if you like this video or if you want more information there. On the sort of practical side of being an intuitive, and even I've covered so much material like this on the back end of my site because it is a development community. So, but let's get into this and really get into, if you want to get into this field, how you can do that in a way that's healthy, that inspires you, and where you can sort of grow yourself into this work in a healthy and productive way. So the first thing that I would recommend doing is to find your why. Find your reason why you want to do this. This is the same thing that a life coach would tell you, or a therapist or someone or a motivational speaker will tell you, is you have to find your why. Why do you want to get into spirituality? Why do you want to work with people in a spiritual capacity? Why do you want to teach? And you're probably going to find a bunch of different reasons that you feel you want to. And allow yourself to really sit with this question day after day after day after day before you really start getting into this, and even while you're doing it. Find your why, because your why is going to tell you a lot about your own trajectory in this. And sometimes our why is healthy, and it's because our heart is drawing us into this field. And then sometimes the reason why we want to get into a certain field is for egoic reasons. And so we have to purify within ourselves, within our own mind, why we want to go into the spiritual field. Why do we want to do this exactly? And it may take you months or even maybe even longer to really refine why you want to do this work. But I will tell you that this work can be very challenging. It can be very tiring. It's very personal. And so you have to be ready for that. And sometimes your why, or why you're getting into this, is what keeps you going. And when you become very busy, or you're in this and you're going through brain fog, or you're struggling with it, you have to have that why to come back to. And that's what will get you through the periods in your life when you are struggling. And so you need to distill and find your reason so that you can make it through challenging situations that you may come across. in the future when you may want to abandon the work. And it's just been so helpful for me, and also for other mystics that I know. When you get bogged down, you've got to come back to that pure place of passion and of reason for doing this. And a lot of the times it's just in you. When you begin to come into this field and you make it your life, it's just who you are. It's just something that's in you. But finding that and intellectualizing that, giving it reasons is extremely important when you begin. Extremely important. And that passion is also what allows you to transform difficult situations and get beyond them, because it's that passion for what you do that can bring you through darker times, that joy. And so you have to connect with that and understand that from the very, very beginning of your practice. Otherwise, it can make your work very inconsistent, or you're going to have to go through that process of finding your why every single time that you have a problem with a client, or a problem with, if you're teaching, a problem with how you're getting a message out or whatever. You got to get your why so that you don't have to find it every single time you run into a hiccup. Okay. Another thing that is very, very helpful that I would recommend is to find a good teacher, especially if you're in the beginning of your journey and there's a lot that isn't clear to you, and you have the passion, you have that fire, your why. Find a good teacher that you feel like you can learn from, that has experience, that has a good intellectual grasp and understanding of the field. That's going to accelerate your process. One of the biggest mistakes that people run into when coming into the spiritual field is this thought that they have to do everything themselves. So they think that they have to channel all of the answers or psychically divine all of the answers to everything, and that they're alone and they have to just be alone with themselves in spirit. If you're a teacher or you're a psychic, you can't follow anyone else. You can't, read information or study, and that's the fastest way to fall into delusion. We do need each other. You do need, like every other field, you do need to learn from a good teacher. This is the way it has been in spirituality for a very long time. And it's significantly harder when you don't have that academic aspect where you're learning from certain teachers. There's also great teachers that are deceased as well. This is also, find your discipline is another one, actually. Find the teachings within esoterica and within the spiritual field that you resonate with. The spiritual field is vast. It's usually divided into two different categories, typically. The Eastern genre, which includes, Asian influences. So you get, Vedic teachings, but you also get, Tibetan Buddhism, things like this. That's a very rich genre. They also have cosmology there that you can learn. Though the Eastern teachings for Westerners, they do tend to be more challenging and less palatable, because while you're learning, for example, the Indian style teachings, there's Sanskrit and there's a different language. And so sometimes with the more Eastern teachings, you're actually learning a different language. And then you're also trying to learn at the same time very advanced spiritual concepts. So that can be very challenging, but there are people who really do enjoy that. And it really is something that makes their heart sing, and they just really enjoy that process. And that's something that you're going to need to explore and understand if you want to use an Eastern system. There's also the Western systems, which is my chosen system. I choose to use anthroposophy, which is esoteric Christianity, which is a Western spiritual system. Great cosmology to use, it's fantastic, and that's my chosen discipline that I like to use and that I like to reference. And so, why you want to choose a discipline or why you want to choose a system is that as an individual, you're one person, you're an individual, you're unique. And that's what makes us amazing, is that we have this uniqueness, this unique experience. But one individual cannot channel themselves the entire structure of the cosmos. You know, one individual can't know precisely every step of the Earth's evolution and the world's creation, because you as an individual weren't incarnated technically at every single second of every single earthly evolution and every single step of even every single year of human evolution. So one individual cannot rightly, through themselves at this point in our evolution, channel an entire system of esoterica. What we do in this field is we have spiritual science, which is a direct cosmology, which means it shows the development of the earth over a very long period of time, the development of humanity over a very long period of time. That gives you the correct structure to be psychic with. Without that structure, you're going to conflate things. If you don't understand time, which is human and planetary evolution and cosmic evolution, the evolution of our solar system, then you're not going to be able to do psychic work without conflating things. And so you need to, on the academic side, like this is study, this is reading, this is real work. You need to understand that. And so you can't just channel it all. It's yin and yang. So the masculine side is the knowledge. You have to have the knowledge, which has been passed down from our ancestors, century after century after century. If you look back, it is a spiritual science, and you can see that, the Aborigines of Australia were talking about, the rainbow serpent and their dream time, which is lucid dreaming and astral travel. The same thing with, the Celts. They had their mythologies and their spiritual religions. So it's obviously India and China were had advanced cosmologies, the Maya. So it's all the same thread of spiritual science or mystery science, but it just gets adapted for certain cultures and comes forward, and then you use it based on the culture and that level of consciousness that culture was, the particular expression of consciousness that culture is, and time will interpret those spiritual laws that are objective differently. And every single civilization that comes forth, and there are 7 in every epoch, will have a slightly different take in evolution than the last one. And so this is spiritual science. This is very clear in anthroposophy as well. And so we need to understand that structure, which is technically the masculine in esoterica. And then once we have that, we can go into the feminine, which is more chaotic, traditionally, symbolically, and more creative. And so the creative aspect can only really serve us when we have that knowledge and when we are educated. So the idea that you can just sort of channel whatever you want and that kind of stuff, that doesn't really work with the teaching side of spirituality. That can be okay if you just want to be a working psychic. You may not need to. I would recommend that you do. I would recommend anybody in this field do, for their own ability to navigate higher realms, right? Actually, I would recommend it across the board. But it becomes really fundamental with teaching, because if the structure isn't there, what ends up happening is people just end up getting caught up in the lower planes, the chaos planes, because there isn't enough structure for them to fully anchor themselves essentially, if that makes sense. So in other words, so far, find your why, find your passion, and get to know it very well within you. Develop it. The second one is find a good teacher, especially if you are at the very beginning of your journey. That's going to take a lot of pressure off of you to have to find everything yourself, or, you know, be alone in this process of the development. You can do it. You can do it all on your own. But it is a lot easier if you can find a teacher, or a few teachers at least. If you know, till you decide who you like, it's going to be a lot easier. Especially if you want to be a teacher, it's good to find a teacher who you like. And then if you like them, that's because there's something within you that is like that teacher. And so the reason why you like a teacher is because there's a shared essence that's within you that's going to be developed through that teacher, but it doesn't really belong to the teacher. It's beyond the teacher. And it's beyond all of us, right? So we just sort of share, in a sense, a Christ essence, like, if that makes sense. And so you find somebody who has the sort of same inner convictions as you, the same style as you, or someone that you admire, or you like the work, and then you find out why you like it, and you develop that part of you. But you understand also that you're probably going to have other influences as well, and you're going to have, eventually, over time, you're going to develop your own take on this and your own creative work. You know, once you learn that structure, you can get extremely creative and bring forth powerful information that's needed, and fill in the gaps, right? Because even when you're learning a system, you're learning a discipline, they're not telling you everything about the Lemurian epoch, or everything about the Atlantean epoch, or everything about the future epochs of mankind. You know, when you get into a discipline, like, say, anthroposophy, they give you the structure and maybe a few examples, but most of that is completely needing to be filled in by great mystics and great individuals remembering who they are and bringing light to it. So learning a system does not mean that you don't get to be creative, that you don't get to do your own thing, that you don't get to sort of bring your own creative self to it. It actually allows you to be more creative, because now you have the keys to properly lock into the Akashic records. You have the correct parameters to properly do so, the right thinking, or the right understanding, because it's all about resonance. So the last thing is that you want to have a good balance between that personal development. So you're personally developing yourself, you're healing yourself, you're taking responsibility for that, you're looking inward, and you're doing your own creative psychic work as well. You know, you're remembering past lives, or you're working with clients, or you're finding yourself, you're finding your voice, which is a creative act for you. And every psychic has a different style in a lot of ways, and accesses different things in different ways. And so you're finding that about yourself. And then while you're doing that, you're also going to want to study. You're also going to want to study esoterica. You're going to want to study mystery science, or you're going to want to study spiritual science, because you're going to need that. You know, again, we cannot just channel everything. You know, you have to have that good, strong base. Okay. And so one of the things that I want to say is that is a bit of a warning, actually. It has become extremely popular to be spiritual now. Again, like I said, say 10, 15, 20 years ago, save the hippies, I think that, it wasn't very popular to do this. And you kind of had to hide. It's a very polarized, it still is, but back 10, 15 years ago, it was even more so. And now we're actually seeing spirituality, especially cosmic spirituality, become more and more in the mainstream. And this is very good. It's really good because it's what's needed, it's what's necessary. You know, dogmatic religion is not going to carry humanity into the next era. You know, it just isn't. A lot of that is dead teachings. You know, we actually need to understand the real mystery science and esoterica behind certain events on our planet and behind ourselves, within ourselves. And so it's very good that we're seeing spirituality come into the mainstream. It's right on time. But with that popularity, has also brought forward a lot of, it's changed the field in the way that I think that people can sometimes see it as a way to just make money or become famous or become popular. And I want to warn you against that right now. I want to say that if you feel like in your heart the reason why you want to be teaching or even practicing as a mystic or even in this field is to be popular, to be influential, to make money, to get likes on your TikTok account or your Instagram account, do not do that. And I'm not saying this from a place of just, um, you know, like ethical standing or anything. I'm saying this for your own protection. The one thing about this field is you have to come into it with a pure heart. And if you come into this with your hands out, like, what can I get? You will attract to you very dark experiences and very dark things, and you will actually be opening yourself up to lower realms. And so I say this as a protection for you. In traditional mystery schools and mystery teachings, mystics were prepared and purified for a very long time before they would ever open up to spiritual realms and get into this work. And it was considered dangerous. And so I want to make that very clear. Do not come into this field if you want to do it just for the money, to be popular. Don't come in with aggression, because this field is not like other fields. It's not like selling vacuum cleaners door to door. It's not like any other field, because when you get into this field, what ends up happening is when you open up to spirit, everything in your life magnifies and becomes more and more intense. And so what ends up happening is sometimes psychics will be all right for the first 5-10 years, maybe a little bit longer. And then what happens is their life will begin to fall apart. And that's because their why, or the reason why they were doing it, became overshadowed by a desire for wealth, status, and power. And so that desire does not mix with psychic work and with spiritual teaching. And I want to be very clear about that, again, for your own safety. When you enter this field, you have to be guided by spirit. And in a lot of ways, you enter a kind of communion with your guides and with your higher self and with your Christ consciousness and with spirit. You are here to serve. Mystics and spiritual teachers, a large portion of their essence is really just a vessel, a pure vessel. That's really what it is. And then eventually over time, you can get the more active solar masculine going, and you can be an open vessel, but then you can begin teaching and radiating. And that takes time. And so it's really something that you want to make sure that you want to do. And then you have to understand that this field you're going to go at your own pace. So what happens is you begin to do this work, and you begin to put yourself out there using all the mediums that you can, maybe using YouTube, having a blog, using whatever forms of promotion you can these days. But you want to make sure that everything that you do is coming from a place of love and coming from a place of service. And that is what's going to carry you. It's going to clarify you, and it's going to make you stronger. Because if you do run into any hiccups and you go into your darkness, you're going to be able to sit with yourself and you're going to be able to say, you know what? I can honestly say that what I've done, everything that I've written or everything when I've done a reading or whatever it is, everything that I've done has come from the pure intention to love and to serve. And when you know that about yourself and about your work, you can survive anything. And you're going to come across hard times, you're going to be challenged. But if you can sit down and you can say that about yourself and about your work, it's a great achievement. And that is what's going to allow you to continue. So you have to have a pure intention. I cannot stress that enough. And what ends up happening is you begin to live kind of more of a miraculous life. You begin to live kind of more of a spiritual life. And, things, you'll be guided by spirit, you'll be tested by spirit, of course, but you'll be guided. And you may, because this path is not one of control, it's not one of aggression, you're not forcing yourself on people or forcing your teachings on people. That's not going to work out very well. It's all about human sovereignty. The more that you do that, the more that you'll find yourself being guided. And you may actually have to continue doing a job that you don't like for a while before you're able to transition into doing sessions or before you're able to transition fully into doing this work. And that's also part of the preparation. That's part of you deciding whether you want to do this. That's part of you conditioning yourself and offering yourself. And it's part of you finding your way. And so you may have to do 2 jobs at once. Most people do. Most people who get into this field it's not like you just are able to teach. You have to often do different jobs at one time, and you slowly build yourself up, usually over years. And so you have to be willing to do that. There's this idea that there's going to be instant fame, instant money. We live in a very materialistic culture, and you have to be ready for the reality that, you may have to ease into this work and you may not. Your work, your work, whether it be teaching or whether it be, readings, it may not pick up. It may be something that moves very slowly, but you have to trust the rhythm that this work comes to you. And you have to keep doing the work on yourself. You have to keep studying, keep growing, and keep going. And you have to be okay with the rhythm of life that is presented to you. And that is actually, strangely enough, that surrendered place of contribution and service is actually what accelerates life. It's actually what allows you to take on more spiritually. The more we force, the more we push, the more we control, the more spirit tends to move away, right? So keep that in mind, because that dynamic becomes very, very obvious in spiritual work. It's obvious in life, but it's really clear in spiritual work. Okay, so now that's sort of like the spiritual end of things. Let's get into the practical side of things. So how do you actually come up with content? How do you actually come up with, even just if you're a working psychic, like promotional work that you want to do to show your clients or to show the world your style, to show the world who you are, to show the world your ideas and your unique takes on, because every person has a unique take on different spiritual things. Like, it's the same concept, but they're not changing it necessarily structurally too much, but they have their own insight on it, their own way of teaching it. And so you want to be able to portray that, to your clients as a mystic. You want to be able to show people, if somebody's booking a session with you, you want to give them a feel of who you are, your style, your approach, right? Maybe even, like I said, your discipline, because there's going to be people who are looking for a certain type of mystic And so you do want to be able to portray who you are. So how do you do that? So on the practical end, what I recommend doing, because again, this is holy service, this work is divine service. So what you want to do is you want to go into a meditative state and you want to sort of feel out into the world, and you want to feel where you think that people are suffering. You want to feel what you think people are confused about, what is not clear, what needs to be said, where is clarity needed. And sometimes this you can meditate and you can feel sort of where the chaos is, negative chaos. And then sometimes, like today, like modern age is a good example of this, but sometimes you'll just find it when you're, on social media. You'll see something and something will strike you. And you'll say, oh, I think that this is out of balance. I think that this is out of balance. And as a mystic, your job is to offer how to bring it in balance. And to do that, you're going to use esoteric language and an esoteric perspective. So you're going to talk about how you can transmute this state. Or if it's not something that needs to be necessarily talked about in that way, they're going to try to explain why it is going on. And you're going to do that on a spiritual level, and what's going on in the human condition, what's going on in the global condition. And that is a service, right? So you're looking to see what the world needs. This is very different than, sometimes I'll just stick to the script. So you want to basically feel out to what is imbalanced, whether it's something that you sort of feel within yourself, like you can feel the collective consciousness, and you can feel that some challenge is coming. You can feel that humanity is going to be challenged in some way, and they may not see it coming. And when it comes, it's going to be very overwhelming. A lot of predictions and things initially that psychics will do are because of that. Some of the most beautiful psychic material from psychics of the past has been them feeling out into the future and saying, what is coming down the pipe? How can we prepare humanity for that? Because there are so many blind spots in humanity, they're not going to see it. So how do we relieve those blind spots? And how do we prepare humanity for certain energies to come? That is the true work of the teaching psychic, the teaching mystic, truthfully. And then also, again, if there's like certain things in society that are going on that are imbalanced, a lot of people, when they hear the esoteric explanation for why certain imbalances exist in society, it allows them to move beyond it. So in other words, the human psyche tends to sort of chase its own tail if there isn't an understanding about a problem that's going on a spiritual level, and then that turns into a logic understanding, and then we can get beyond things. But if we don't esoterically understand, a lot of people, if they don't esoterically understand something, they'll get trapped in it. And so the mystic's job is also to look out into the world and see what needs to be spoken about in a loving, clarifying way, if that makes sense. And that is a great service, because that's going to allow us to understand the challenges of the time, essentially, right? That's what mystics are in a lot of ways very good at. Because the logical mind, the thinking mind, can't project itself into a lot of places the psychic mind can, because the logical mind will only repeat the patterns that it already has. But the psychic mind is the pure creative aspect, and that will allow you to see things that the intellectual mind cannot fully predict. It allows you to see a larger swath of reality and pick up patterns that are beyond the thinking mind. And so that is why mystics and psychics have always, that's what predictions were really truly about. Predictions were initially, why mystics do predictions is not really so that people can feel more control in their life. Like usually when people get a psychic reading, they just want a bunch of predictions on what's going to happen in their life because they want to feel more in control, and they don't feel like they're in control. But the highest version of prediction is a little bit different than that. And it's actually a psychic just feeling out into the world or into somebody's life and, you know, doing a bit of a read and then giving them the proper tools and solutions for something that may come their way. But the difference is that it could be in something in society that no one's paying attention to right now, or within your client could have 5 questions they want to know about and they want a prediction on, but the real information that they need is something completely different. And that is also a very challenging part of being a mystic, is that people can become very disgruntled if you don't, read for them exactly how they want you to read and they say exactly what they want you to say. Right? But there is this level with psychic work where you are driven and you are guided by something beyond yourself, right? And often beyond the client or what the client thinks that they want, and what even the world on a larger scale thinks. And so that is the mystic's work, is to do that predictive work, not so that we can feel a sense of control, but so that we can prepare, if that makes sense. It's a little bit different. Okay. And the next very good way to begin getting teachings out there, getting yourself out there, is through actually taking things in your personal life. Like I said in the beginning of this video, my whole channel for probably, my gosh, almost 10 years was basically, like, I looked back at it and I was like, wow, I'm so different now. I looked back at it and it was basically me sharing just visions I'd had and just me sharing experiences I had. A lot of it was that. A lot of it was kind of like story times. And then eventually I got more into teaching. But there is so much value when you are in this field to taking things in your own life, experiences that you've had, and sharing them and explaining them. So, for example, you take a challenge that you had when you were a child, and you have gotten to a point with that experience that you've worked yourself beyond it. And you take the little gems of wisdom that you've gotten through transforming that experience, from transforming that trauma. You take those and then you teach other people. So on the other side of trauma is wisdom. On the other side of trauma and pain is always wisdom, your greatest wisdom. And whatever you have struggled with in your life that haunts you, that is your greatest pain, at some point in your soul's life is going to be probably your greatest teaching. That's how this works. And so how else we work as teachers is we get clarity on things in our life. We heal ourselves. We answer questions. It's so funny. I always think, like, whenever I do a video, I swear it's 10 years of struggle. And then I turn it into, like, a lecture or something, or so much study and so much work. And it goes into this little video or this little lecture. And that's really what it's like to do this work, is you really have to have that saturated, I think, clear content. And how you get that is through knowing yourself, and through also including this element of you sharing what you've been through. And everybody has this. Everybody has a struggle, whether it be addiction, whether it be some kind of, abuse, whether it be something less than that, but just something within your own mind that you're wondering about or that you felt blocked on. Everybody has that. And that's actually your gift. That is actually your gift. You wouldn't think so, but it's that setup, it's that void that actually crystallizes you into the best that you're going to be. It's funny how that happens, but that's the reality. So the next thing that you can do besides feeling out into the world at what the world needs is actually taking things from your own life that were pivotal for you, like even spiritual things. Like, for example, if you have a question about the cosmos or about interdimensionals or the planet Earth, and then you discover that answer through study, through your own spiritual visions, you make this amazing teaching that's basically a conglomerate of your own spiritual understanding and your own vision, and maybe experiences. You have that personal thing going on. And then you also have the strong esoterica behind it to give it that structure. You have the real teaching, you have the mystery science behind it. And that is what usually forms, in my opinion, the best teachings. It also allows you to function very efficiently as just a working psychic as well. That balance of masculine and feminine energy as a psychic, and how we need both of those elements to be functioning. All right, so the next thing would be yes, I want to go back again to, I think, the idea of forcing yourself or pushing yourself on people or pushing yourself on the world. I think this is a very important conversation, because we do live in a very materialist society, and our innocent, and I want to say this so clearly, our innocent instinct is that we can treat, again, psychic work like we can market it like it's a tube of toothpaste, or we can sort of treat psychic work and mystical work like you're selling something else. And I want to bring it back to, we cannot be aggressive. You cannot be aggressive about this. You have to know that what you're doing has to come from love. And you have to know that if you push yourself on people and you over promote yourself, you over market yourself, and you have not yet found your why, you have not yet found your discipline, you haven't gone through enough cycles of discovery with this process, then something really toxic and dangerous can happen, which is that you can magnify yourself to becoming, what looks like this big public figure, this really popular person. But what ends up happening is, as you continue going forward, you become more and more pressurized. And if your technique and your ideas and your teachings aren't rooted enough in love, and they aren't rooted enough in spiritual science, in true esoteric science, then what will happen is you'll basically pressurize yourself to collapse eventually. And this is why you have to almost treat your career like divination. You have to just offer yourself to society and to this work, and then you have to be guided by your spirit. And that's how it has to be. Because if you become too aggressive and you push it too much, which is so common in our Instagram and social media world, then you can become very known or very popular very fast. But then when it really comes down to it, the level of popularity that you have and the level of exposure that you have is greater than your skill set. It's greater than your abilities. And so eventually you could get in a situation where you can't handle it because it's too much pressure, and this work is so um, it's so finicky in some ways. Like, it's so, you really have to be at a strong point with yourself. You have to be able to hold energies and hold yourself very strongly in basically any environment. And you have to really develop yourself over a period of time. So the biggest mistake, and I think the biggest danger today in our social media Instagram world, where you can very easily promote yourself, is to promote yourself too hardcore, too fast, and then pressurize yourself to the point where you abandon the work because you got too caught up in using this work for fame or money, or you've pressurized yourself to a point where you're not actually spiritually integrated and you're not actually spiritually strong enough to handle it. And I've seen this unfortunately happen to a lot of different mystics, and it's not a good thing to see. So I do want to talk about that because, again, I feel like it is the challenge of our time to, with our, our culture, how fast we can share things, and how addicted we can become to likes and fame and status and stuff like that. So that's what I would say. For me, my process started, way back, at least publicly around, at least on YouTube, started, around 2009. For me, again, it was just sort of sharing different ideas, and it evolved into the thing I absolutely love most in the world, and the thing that brings me the most joy in the world. And talking with you guys every week is just brings me so much joy to sit with you and connect with you. So I'm very grateful to be able to do this and to be here and to be with you. But find your why. Find the reason why you want to do this work. Honestly, truly, no one's listening. No one's going to look in your journal or in your mind. Just find your why. Find your passion. And this will also help you because, again, there's a lot of different kinds of psychic work. Mediumship is very different than traditional psychic work, and medical mediumship is different than traditional mediumship. And teaching, there's so many different ways to teach in different styles and different disciplines. So the more that you know yourself, the more that you find your why, the much more easier you're going to navigate all of the complexity of the spiritual community. That'll be your core. That'll be the thing that you keep coming back to no matter what. And that'll keep you going. And it's that why, that passion, that understanding of who you are, that know thyself, that will allow you to rise from the ashes and be reborn and be creative. That's what you need to find first. And that'll also allow you to recognize what you genuinely like. If you don't know why you want to teach or why you want to work as a psychic exactly, then you're not going to find your path. Because your path is basically an expression of who you are, and your why is an expression of who you are. Okay? And understand that, again, this work is different from other jobs. It takes all of you. It's extremely personal. Even just the act of psychic connection in itself, you have to give a little piece of you every single time. And so you have to have a very strong inner system to be able to do this for a long period of time, because every time that you get into your holy state, it takes something from you and you get something. So you have to understand what that process is, and you have to be able to smoothly do these transformations, smoothly do these exchanges with spirit, this alchemy that we do with spirit. We have to be able to do that and not lose. Okay? When this is not understood, that's when we get drained, that's when we get broken down, that's when you hear about all these psychics in very poor condition. It's because that connection is not really understood. So this is why finding a teacher, understanding spiritual science, again, there is an actual spiritual science to psychic connection. It's not just different for everybody. There are pillars in psychic work. There's pillars in esoterica, in every aspect of it, that are holy truths, divine mechanics of the planet, of the individual, of the cosmos. We need to know these. Right. To not know these is to automatically just go into the lower planes and be messing around, because you're not precise enough. So find your teacher, find your discipline, and get to work. And let yourself grow naturally. Let yourself grow organically. Don't try to push yourself out there, make yourself popular, not because of some moral reason, but because you don't want to pressurize yourself so you can't make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. And that's totally fine. But you want to get to the point where you're growing organically, so you don't have all that pressure on you to be right all the time. And you don't have, you're kind of slowly catalyzed by your guides and by life, and you allow yourself to rise at a pace that you can handle. And that's what's going to give you that nice long career. That's what's going to give you that beautiful blossoming, right? You want to grow organically, how you're naturally catalyzing yourself, because there's a mystery to that. There's a secret to that. There's something very deep going on as you rise into working with your clients, working as a teacher. You want that process to be very organic. It doesn't mean that you can't advertise. It doesn't mean that you can't post on social media every day. It's really just the attitude that you have behind it. It's that you have to have your why. And that why, on some level, should be love and service. And that's what's going to catalyze you into a good, strong, healthy career where you're not only serving society with your work, but you're also evolving yourself. You're also growing yourself. Okay? So that's what I would say. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in with me today. I will see you in my next video. I'm just trying to think. Oh, yes, if you do like this work, please consider making a donation so I can keep it free and out there. And if you really like this conversation, you can join my private members platform, where there are forums, and I do 3-hour live Q&As every 2 weeks. And during those Q&As, I basically just answer whatever questions you want. I usually can do around 30 to 35 questions. That's usually about what I can do in that time span. And it's just whatever you want to know, whether it be societal or deep esoterica, whatever it is. That's our time to connect. And I just cover whatever you guys want to cover. So maybe I'll see you over there. But if not, I'll be right here back on YouTube next week. And I'll see you then.